This is CNN Breaking News.
Hello, I'm John Vors at the CNN Center in Atlanta with more now on the breaking news on the FBI search of Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort. The U.S. Justice Department has just filed its response opposing Trump's request for a special master to review all materials taken from his home. The judge had already signaled her preliminary intent to allow a neutral third party, typically a retired judge, to review the documents. The former president's attorneys claim a special master is necessary to ensure the Justice Department returns any of Trump's private belongings and documents covered by attorney-client privilege. But the Justice Department has indicated it's already using an internal filter team to review everything which was seized by the FBI. To Washington now, CNN's political correspondent Sarah Murray live this hour. So, Sarah, just in broad brushstrokes, what are we looking at here in terms of the response by the DOJ?
Well, we are looking at, overall in terms of the legal argument, the Justice Department opposing what Donald Trump is looking for, which is a special master, an independent third party to overview these documents. The Justice Department is saying, look, after this search they did on the president's residence at Mar-a-Lago in August, they've already gone through those materials. They've already had a filter team set up to move any potentially privileged materials. And they're saying a special master is not necessary in this case. But they're also shedding a lot of light on what they took when they went to Mar-a-Lago. They said they seized over 100 unique documents with classified markings. And this is important because this came after Donald Trump, there was already this subpoena issued for these documents to be handed over. They're saying that when the FBI went in, when they did this search in August, they recovered twice as many documents as the Trump team handed over in response to this subpoena. So the Justice Department is casting a lot of doubt on the fact that there was actually a diligent search on behalf of Trump and his representatives to hand over all these classified documents. They included a photo in this filing that sort of shows these documents with these classified cover pages to give a sense of, sort of the scope of what they found when they went in that search in August. And they also pointed out in their filing that they believe documents were likely concealed or removed from a storage room in Mar-a-Lago in order to obstruct this investigation. And, this was an important filing for the Justice Department. They asked for additional pages when they put it before the judge because they wanted to sort of lay out not only their legal argument for why they do not think a special master is necessary in this case, but they also wanted to sort of lay out the timeline of events here and in particular rebut what the Trump team has been saying in their filings. The Trump team has been saying that the former president was very cooperative, gave the Justice Department everything they were asking for, and what the Justice Department is saying in this filing is that was not the case when they showed up there in August.
Sarah, thank you. Sarah Murray there with the overview of what's in that filing and the important bits. Thank you, Sarah. Let's bring in CNN legal analyst and former federal prosecutor Elliot Williams. Also, CNN national security analyst Juliet Kayyem. Thanks to you both for being with us. Elliot, I want to begin with you. When we looked at the filing, it was extra pages that was requested. They had a maximum of 20. They went for 40, double what was normally allowed. So when you look at the detail, we've seen the summary of the filing, some of the details there. What's your immediate takeaway from the importance of this filing and the likelihood of success?
Yeah, so it's not uncommon for parties to get a page limit raised on a filing in court, partly because, and in a situation like this, these are issues that have never come up before in American law. Just think about how unique it is, or the fact that it is unique that you have a former president accused of having mishandled documents, perhaps having broken the law. And this presents a number of very complex legal questions of, number one, how sort of what to do with documents once they're taken back from the president, or who's entitled to them, and so on. So it's quite complex. So number one, that's on the page limits point. Number two, as Sarah Murray had just noted a moment ago, this suggestion of obstruction of justice, which they really in clear terms lay out. Now, this is not an accusation of a crime against the president or anyone else, but they do define and lay out instances where they believe that someone at Mar-a-Lago, whether it was the president or someone else, sought to thwart an active open criminal investigation. And that is incredibly serious. And perhaps it ends in criminal charges. We'll just have to see.
So, Juliet, to you on that point, the obstruction of justice point, if someone at Donald Trump's residence tried to obstruct justice or the investigation here, ultimately, does that mean that Donald Trump is responsible for this?
No, not necessarily. As Elliot was saying, it's who that allegation is against. We don't know. It just the reason why the Department of Justice raised it was to essentially justify to the magistrate why they had to go in with a search warrant, because they no longer had confidence in Trump's legal team's representations that they had handed over everything. And, you don't have to second guess it. It ends up being true, right? They then go in, the FBI goes in with a search warrant and finds twice as much stuff as they anticipated because of either misrepresentations, lack of knowledge, or obstruction of justice by Trump or his lawyers about what was still at Mar-a-Lago after that initial series of conversations in which some of the information was given back. So in many ways, this picture that's at the very end, I know we've shown it, of the filing, it's sort of shocking, and the carelessness, right? I think the Department of Justice wanted to show, look, this is at best, this is a very careless person. But also, if you look at the markings on the documents, these are the most sensitive documents that the American government retains and holds. They are, what people have to remember is you are only really supposed to view them in either SCIFs or secure facilities or the Oval Office, places in which that are highly secure. And the reason why is because it's not simply the content of them, sources, methods, foreign intelligence assistance, things that will implicate America's national security interests, is that you also don't want them duplicated. And so I actually went away from this picture just thinking, we don't know who had an iPhone and is texting this to friends, right? It's not just these documents; it's the pictures, the potential duplication of these documents that then makes it almost impossible to control sort of who their distribution is. So this is a big national security challenge for the Biden administration, because if you're an ally, if you're an intelligence agent, if you're an enemy, you're looking at the filing and which is disclosing a very, very, as I say, at best, careless retention of classified information. But you're also wondering, what kind of damage has been done to our capabilities and to plans and programs that help protect not just the United States interests, but our allies' interests. So this is a pretty strong document against all the claims being made by Trump and his team that you've heard over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, and our keen viewers at home will notice that Harry Littman, former US Attorney, has joined us here. So good to have you with us, Harry. I just want to get your take on this, because it seemed that before the filing was made, the Department of Justice, in a way, Juliet touched on this, wanted to set the record straight from some of the erroneous and misleading claims that were coming from the Trump legal team. If you look at this filing, how successfully have they been at doing that?
I'd say pretty successful, and half of the whole filing goes to facts. And by the way, once again, it's because Trump led with his chin. What they say up front is, you're a new judge that Trump just plucked, and dumped a new filing on. You hadn't seen the affidavit. For that reason, we've got to develop some of the facts and give them to you. So their whole justification for revealing more of the record is that Trump himself went sort of forum shopping. And yeah, Juliet, the picture does speak 1,000 words, but imagine that, we're all done, and you go back in the search and find twice as many as they gave you in the first place. So the facts, I think, are very strong and put the lie to what is the leading kind of factual claim in Trump's submission to the court. We were cooperative all the way through. It basically blows that factual submission to smithereens. Then there's the whole legal argument, which, if anything, is even stronger.
There's also the point that was made in this filing that essentially the work of a special master has already been done. And this is from the summary of the filing.
Right.
In any event, the government's filter team has already completed its work of segregating any seized materials that are potentially subject to attorney-client privilege. And the government's investigative team has already reviewed all of the remaining materials. In other words, it's already done. So, Elliot, does this sort of go to the part of the argument that by making this request, the Trump team is essentially engaging in delaying tactics?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So backing up a little bit for our international friends who are viewing this right now, the way a special master typically works is that when a search happens and they uncover what are called attorney-client privilege documents, communications between an individual and their attorneys, they will figure out some way of dealing with those documents so law enforcement can't really use them in a criminal proceeding. This is a little bit different. This is what's called, or at least what the president is asserting, is what's called executive privilege. Somehow that by being a former president, his papers or documents or things that he touched cannot be made available to other areas of the government. It's an odd argument. Needless to say, even if he had a point here, and even if he were correct on this executive privilege point, the Justice Department has had these documents since August 8th. And they've been reviewing them and filing them, collating them, whatever it might be. Any request for some other party to come in and start segregating documents and taking them apart is moot because the Justice Department's already gotten access to them. So yes, it does appear like this is at best an attempt to delay and slow down the proceedings here.
And we also heard from Trump's lawyer speaking to Fox News on apparent issues they have with the Department of Justice. Here he is.
We have a lot of problems really accepting everything at face value that's coming out of DOJ these days. It's a very politicized place, I'm sad to say.
Juliet, to you. Jamie Trusty, I think his name is. That is a claim which is sweeping and damning at the same time, backed up there, with absolutely no evidence at all. So where's it coming from?
Well, I mean, they don't. It's very interesting to see how the Trump team is trying to defend him. I mean, a lot of it is just sort of throwing everything at the wall. And the DOJ's political, Biden, why didn't they do Hillary? All the things that that you've been hearing over the last couple of weeks. He can declassify anything he wants, regardless of who it might harm or who might be dead because of it. Just everything at the wall because they knew, let's just put it this way, they knew that the information we're learning tonight would eventually come out. In other words, the ways in which they hid, denied, delayed the appropriate retention, essentially, by the United States government of its most secret documents. And so I don't really take much from those kinds of arguments about whether DOJ is being political. This is all being overseen by judges, some Democrat appointed, some Republican appointed. But I think it goes to a different issue, which is that the national security implications of this, the substantive issue that we're talking about, is impossible for Trump team to defend. It is at this stage. They know it. You can't say these documents don't mean anything. You can't say documents that retain information about human intelligence assets who are helping us, documents about our allies and our enemies aren't important. So instead, they're going after, it's just political. So it's very important that this brief today, this filing today, as well as talking about the consequences of what Trump did, really focus on this is about the United States national security interests today. And I think there's a line in the filing that was so straightforward that you just have to, but truthful, which is essentially says, these are not Donald Trump's documents. I mean, this is not a question of he had something and we want it. Is it he has something that's not his and we need it back because it contains the secrets of to protect Americans, to protect us and our allies who are watching right now, wondering how have their intelligence capabilities also been made vulnerable by what Trump has done.
And Harry, to you, the old saying: if the law is on your side, argue the law. If the facts are on your side, argue the facts. If you don't have either one, bang the table. Trump's team has been banging the table fairly loudly. And now we've got this filing from the DOJ, which sort of puts everything into perspective about exactly what has been going on for the last, year or so.
Yeah, and look, the number one point is what Juliet just said, and it's really the leading legal point for DOJ, too. He's a citizen. He has zero entitlement, or at least no entitlement superior to anyone else. So he's trying somewhat cagily. His motion doesn't exactly say what sort of privilege he's even seeking, but it just cannot be. It fails as a matter of logic for all the reasons that Juliet says. It fails blatantly as a matter of law. The law is really clear. These documents, not just our public documents, they belong in the archives because of their, and they're classified, that could do damage. So it doesn't. The danger of this, of his motion, and her odd kind of indication, maybe I'll grant a special master, is that it would upend and put back on the footing that Trump has been seeking the whole time of executive privilege. And the DOJ just slices through that legally and factually. And legally, it says, look, they're not his. He can't even bring a lawsuit. He has no interest in these. They don't belong to him at all. If and when he's charged, he can make any claim he wants to, under the law. But for now, he's a guy who has documents. He's a citizen who has documents that he has no business having, period.
Okay, with that, we'll take a short break. Elliot Williams, Juliet Kayyem, Harry Lippman, thank you so much for being with us. We're beginning our coverage here. We will take a short break. Back in a moment. You're watching CNN. "20 minutes past the hour. Welcome back, everyone. We are following breaking news about the Justice Department's filing on why a special master, an independent review of evidence seized by the FBI from Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate is not needed. This is the response to a filing by the Trump team. Let's go back now to CNN national security analyst Juliet Kayyem, former US Attorney Harry Lippman. Thank you for staying with us. And Juliet, to you, the prosecutors included a photo of the front cover of the documents with markings classified. What was your initial reaction when you saw that? And do you have an example of what sort of intelligence or information, in a general sense, would be marked that way?
So I mean, we don't know if those documents were laid out for the picture, but what we do know is that they're not in a protected facility or in any ways protected. The way it's described is that these documents are essentially just lying around, is really the technical term to put it. So those documents, just from my experience, so the red ones, and they're careful to protect what the markings on would be the sort of top secret in colloquial terms. There's different markings, but the information that would disclose sources and methods. Why is that important? Because a lot of information that's classified, lower classifications levels, might be about sort of intelligence concerns or generic fears about, there's a rising terror threat, or we're concerned about China X, Y, and Z. What these documents contain is information that would be relevant for a president to know, that say things like, we have 12, human assets that have infiltrated Al-Qaeda or ISIS. They are doing this and telling us that, right? So in other words, it gets to the sources and methods, or it might describe an intelligence gathering method. We're able to capture the telephone communications of Putin, or whatever it is, right? These are the things that you don't want to disclose to your enemies, or even to us, even to the public, because they go to sort of, how are we collecting this information? So that's what those documents are, just to tell you this. So you wouldn't see those documents in the light of day at any stage. You wouldn't see them in a way in which they could be duplicated, which is a primary concern. You wouldn't see them with your phone. In other words, you have to give up your phone to see information like this. And then the rest of the stuff in the picture is somewhat redacted. You really can't see its classification level, but the picture is you simply can't justify it, right? I mean, these information does not belong to Donald Trump. He is a private citizen who should not retain this information. The information contains the highest levels of secrecy about America's sources and methods and our intelligence gathering capabilities. And here they are at a hotel that is open to the public, being held by a former president whose lawyers had already told us that they retained none of this information. It's a narrative they'll try to get out of, but that's basically what DOJ is saying.
And Harry, there are a range of reasons we can speculate all day long as to why these documents would end up at Mar-a-Lago. But in terms of prosecutions and crimes which have been committed, what's on the far end of seriousness and what's on the low end of maybe not so serious in terms of prosecution?
It's all serious once he knows that he has them and refuses to return them. Yes, it would be even in your head spins to see this in the first place, and maybe it spins 2 times if he's actually trying in some way to parlay this into an advantage or sell it, but it's absolutely unnecessary in terms of the crime. The crime is just what Juliet said. I want to make one point about a skiff. Anyone who's ever been in them sees this picture and has a heart attack. You have to leave your phone out. You can't bring it in, not simply so you don't take pictures. A skilled adversary potentially, if you bring your phone in, can themselves take pictures or overhear things. I mean, we are talking about very wicked and ingenious adversaries, and documents strewn around on the floor just leave you in a complete cold sweat thinking about it. But to get to your question, it doesn't matter. The crime here, the obstruction is he took them. He knew he didn't have a right to take them. He lied about having given them all up. That's when he knew there was an investigation afoot. That's serious enough. That's obstruction, an actual 20-year maximum in the federal code. That's whether or not there's a further crazy Manchurian candidate scenario here or not doesn't matter.
And Julie, one of the things that's been raised by Republicans and supporters of the former president is the timing here, 100 days before midterms. And now suddenly this all comes out into the wash. When you look at the filing by the DOJ, do they kind of address the why now factor here, the fact that it's taken so long and why it's now happening at this point so close to the midterm elections?
Yes. So, and I think that that's important because one of the narratives that you're hearing by Trump team is both its closeness to a midterm election, but if the stuff were that important, why did they wait that long? And so what DOJ does is in the filing is it extends the lens a little bit and says, wait a second, this just didn't happen on some day and we decided we were just going to show up. It shows months and months of a couple things, not of negotiation or discussion, but also just a clear statement that they were essentially lied to. That we don't know who lied to them, but they were essentially told that they had the documents. They then came to learn that there were plenty of classified documents that were still at Mar-a-Lago. That then started a new round. That round then comes up short, and then they go to the judge. Once they decide to go to the judge, though, then everything happens fast. There's no delay. Judge returns the search warrant within hours. They wait a few days to go in. It's a weekend. They clearly did that. People are forgetting this. They clearly did that because they wanted Trump not at Mar-a-Lago. Trump at that stage has gone up to New York because he has another court case he had to deal with in terms of a deposition. So they were being smart. You don't want Trump there. It wouldn't help anyone in terms of what was happening. And then everything moves quickly. So I think it's really important that both the DOJ started as it should, or National Archives started as they should start. They're essentially denied, delayed, lied to, obstructed. Then they go to a court, and then everything happens quickly. So and once again, the documents are not Trump's to keep. This is not a question of he has something that they want. This is a question of he has something that he, as DOJ makes clear, that are not his.
I think it's important once again to hear from Trump's lawyer trying to explain why they believe a special master or independent reviewer or counsel or whatever, third party, is actually needed from their point of view to review this evidence. Here he is again.
There's still a need for a judge to get involved on every aspect of this, checking their assertions of privilege, but also giving us fair, timely access, letting us build a case for why this search warrant was not only essentially morally wrong, but legally wrong.
Harry, that was 39 words. Anything there actually correct, or is this mostly wrong and misleading?
No, look, so 2 points. They have plenty of time to do it if and when they're charged. That's first. Second, there is a person who does that thing. He's called the magistrate judge, and there are a small number of documents, and the affidavit itself actually gives the procedure. It's very simple. Finally, I'll just say it's not a matter of trust. If the DOJ were to mess up here and somebody on the trial team, as opposed to the taint team, were actually to be exposed to attorney-client privilege, it's a death ray. That person is off the case. There's every incentive for the department to do it right. So you know, I think it's sort of wrong about 6 different ways.
Harry Littman, Juliet Kayyem, thank you guys for staying with us. We appreciate
Thanks,
you.
Juliet.
In the meantime, we'll take a short break. When we come back, we'll have a lot more on the US Department's response to Donald Trump's special master request to review evidence seized from Mar-a-Lago by the FBI. We're following this late-breaking story right here on CNN. We are live, 29 minutes past the hour. Welcome back, everyone. Coming up to 34 minutes past the hour, I'm John Vors. You're watching CNN Newsroom. More now on breaking news. The new details on the FBI search of Donald Trump's Florida home have been revealed in a court filing by the Justice Department, which argues against a request by Trump's legal team to appoint a special master to review documents and evidence which was seized from his home. The Justice Department lawyers argue Trump lacks standing over presidential records because they're the property of the US government and do not belong to him. In addition, lawyers say the documents were likely concealed and removed from a storage room at Mar-a-Lago as part of an effort to obstruct the FBI's investigation. For more, we go to Los Angeles. Civil rights attorney and CNN legal analyst Ariva Martin is with us this hour. So, Ariva, thank you for being with us. You know, if we look at the new details here, there's that claim of possible obstruction of justice, that these documents were taken from somewhere and moved to another place so the FBI wouldn't find them. How serious is that?
Oh, very serious, John. And we are hearing in great detail about what happened to those documents. And we know that FBI agents went into Mar-a-Lago and they didn't find all of these documents in some sealed location, that there were actual documents found in the private office of Donald Trump, inside desk in that private office. We also know that the statement submitted to the Department of Justice in June by Trump lawyers is completely false. The statement that said that they had done a search and review and that they were turning over all of the top secret documents. We know that the FBI went in and recovered over 100 documents, more documents recovered by that search than what were turned in by the attorney who submitted that there had been this diligent search. So it just appears that documents were everywhere in this private residence, documents that do not belong to Donald Trump. These are government documents, many of which should have never left certain locations inside the White House. And this prolonged period that Donald Trump and others engaged in obfuscating and refusing to turn over documents have all been laid out now in this 36-page filing by the Department of Justice.
Yeah, and within that 36 pages, it was expected to be a very lengthy filing. And one of the main points from the summary seems to be this. Plaintiff, as in Donald Trump, has shown no basis for the court to grant injunctive relief. Plaintiff is not likely to succeed on the merits. He will suffer no injury absent an injunction, let alone irreparable injury. And the harms to the government and the public would far outweigh any benefit to the plaintiff. So that's the pushback, right, in terms of the law. There's no real argument here legally for this special master.
Absolutely, John. And underlying that argument by the Department of Justice is basically, hey, look, we've already gone through these documents. A very detailed process of review of the documents was laid out when that search warrant was granted by the original judge. An affidavit was submitted along with the request for a search warrant, laying out a process that would be used by various teams within the Department of Justice to review those documents. So the Department of Justice is saying the train has already left the station. We got these documents over 2 weeks ago. We've already reviewed them, and there's just a small portion of these top secret documents that arguably may be attorney-client privilege, and they were already separated out. Those documents have already been identified. So the Department of Justice is saying this is just a complete waste of time. It's unnecessary, and it's not going to change the results because the review of the documents has already occurred.
We don't know specifically what the classified information is within these documents. We just know it's marked classified. If there is a possible way of linking these missing documents that were taken allegedly by Donald Trump and found at Mar-a-Lago to some kind of breach of national security, what happens then?
it just makes the legal jeopardy that Trump and others are in even more significant. We already know from this 36-page filing, John, that the department believes there's been obstruction of justice, that the department believes that there have been efforts to conceal, to hide, to not cooperate with a legitimate DOJ investigation. So if there is some risk assessment done, and we know that's actually being done inside the government at this moment, and there's a determination that somehow those documents ended up, in the hands of some adversary, or that they put some of the U.S. assets at risk, it only increases the legal jeopardy that Trump is apparently from this filing already in.
And according to the former Nixon White House counsel and CNN contributor John Dean, the DOJ response, apart from anything else, was this attempt essentially to set the record straight. Here he is.
They felt that they had to address the facts that were not properly laid out in the Trump brief, and the law was not properly laid out. And I think the other thing they want to do is knock down the idea that there is an executive privilege here. There is none under the law. It is a fantasy that Trump doesn't seem to understand, that you can't invoke executive privilege against the executive.
So just on that last point, just explain essentially what he's talking about there about executive privilege, and you can't claim executive against the executive. Over to you.
Yeah, two kinds of privileges come up frequently when we're talking about Donald Trump and his legal filings. And one is attorney-client privilege. And those are communications between an attorney and the client. And those are sacrosanct. Those are absolutely confidential. And the government said there were a small number of documents that may fall into that category. And then there is this broad term that Trump likes to use, or he likes to use it broadly, is the concept of executive privilege. The problem that Trump has is that the executive privilege that belongs to the president is not applicable to the former president. That privilege belongs to the current president, which happens to be Joe Biden, not Donald Trump. And when he left the White House and was no longer president, he lost his ability to claim executive privilege. And that's the privilege that allows the president to talk to his top advisors and to be able to have communications that are open and honest and not have to worry about those communications being shared with others, outside of the close-knit circle of the president. But that exists for the sole purpose of the president of the United States conducting business on behalf of the government. Donald Trump is like any other former employee of the U.S. government. He no longer enjoys any rights, benefits, or privileges that would prevent him from being held accountable for criminal activity in the same way that others who've left the government are not above the law and are subject to penalties if they engage in criminal activity.
Ariva, a good point to finish on. Thanks for being with us. Ariva Martin there, a civil rights attorney and a CNN legal analyst. Thank you.
Thanks, John.